Welcome back to another episode of the Dynasty Dingers podcast. We are recording on Tuesday, September 17th. This is a Scout the Stat Line podcast. If you are a member, we thank you. If you're not a member, check out the website. We're going to have a lot of off-season content coming at you. I'm working on some 2023, 2024 draft stuff. Doc has his Sunday Smoke every Sunday, which we are diving into deep for this episode. And we're going to have a lot of fun stuff breaking down, I think, year performers, what our expectations were coming into 2024 and what actually happened. I know I definitely missed on a few of those. But Doc, we are going to dive into your Sunday Smoke today. But first, what's going on, brother?
Man, I just came fresh off of an evening doubleheader of softball, church league softball, folks. It's upper echelon competition. After last week, we had this break between the summer and the fall seasons, and came out rusty. And I was wondering if maybe I'm losing my touch. I was dribbling I tried a new swing. I went from up back here to kind of slugger style. I'm doing less
like a Jose Bautista.
Kind of, and I'm doing so instead of doing this, I'm doing a kind of a. I try to do a Kyle Manzardo little thing, but that's probably not the best thing to look for. Anyway, and slow pitch, right? So I kind of like this because then when it comes in slow, I can time it really nice. Anyway, I felt like it wasn't working. I was dribbling, I was popping up and dribbling grounders. It was I can beat out grounders, but still, it's not sexy. So today, though, I was just kept doing what I was doing. I'm driving line. I just kind of tightened the grip up and tried to just pull it a little more, just drive it a bit more, and it worked. I started driving some beauties. I almost hit one over the fence. Boys and girls out there, ladies and gentlemen, I'm fast as heck. I'm the fastest white guy y'all know. This is well, maybe not Bobby Witt. Okay, but other than Bobby Witt, and Jake McCarthy, and I'm fast.
Corbin Carroll.
Yeah,
Corbin
listen,
is
I'd
Corbin
love
is
to know
mixed,
how fast
so that's
I am
unfair.
compared to those guys. I'm very fast. Anyway, I hit so many inside the park home runs, it's silly. But that's a lot of talk. We've just lost so many listeners.
No, I am curious though. Is the softball field attached to the church, or is this on a separate designated location?
We're moving on up, man. They moved to a bigger area and start to build a new church building, and then over time they built up their own softball field there, which is awesome. And they haven't changed their message or anything, so they're not selling out. So far so good. It seems like when churches become mega churches, they can get a little weird. So we'll see what happens. But as for right now, we're in the perfect little wheelhouse. I'm happy. We won both. I played for another team. I played for my own team today. I'm coaching, obviously, and we won big in both games. I'm pretty ecstatic. Good way to enter the podcast. A little bit of celebration of whiskey.
Yeah, I do miss playing. Once I'm back in the Midwest, I think we'll jump back into it. But nice to hear that you did well tonight. Tonight's more about kind of your Sunday Smoke, as I had mentioned, breaking down some of the things that you were right about, some of the things that you were wrong about. We're going to briefly just talk about how we did in leagues this year. We're not going to bore the listener at all because, frankly, they don't care. But I think the important thing for us to just discuss is maybe some of the players that we're looking forward to either moving this offseason, holding on, maintaining that value, hoping for future payback and return on that. And then maybe some moves that we want to make, maybe some players that we want to target this offseason. I mean, we'll kind of shoot towards that towards the end of the episode. But I'm going to kind of pass it off to you for just a minute and kind of break down what you did with Sunday Smoke, and then we can dive into it.
I'm in, brother. And frankly, yeah. I mean, this is essentially an audit, right? Why are you listening to us? I hope that we can provide some entertainment. I hope that, I hope that you've had some fun along the way. But at the end of the day, if we're giving you 90% garbage advice and thoughts, both of us, it's cool if one of us is a bum like me. But as long as at least Matt or someone is giving you some decent advice.
Doc, I don't know. I started to read Detmers last night, and it did not go well.
Yeah, I mean, he was looking so good. He's that guy, man. He's that guy. Where
who gives up 7 runs against the worst team in history?
I had traded him right before his demotion in our deep league, the 30-man. And the last couple starts before the blow up, I was like, oh, what have I done? Maybe he's turning the corner. And I don't know. Just don't think it's happening.
But yes, I would agree. We are auditing ourselves tonight. And I think it'll be interesting to just kind of talk about our cross leagues, and both in our 30 man, we both kind of did the same. But kind of dive into it. I like some of the names we have in the Sunday Smoke, but do you feel like what I said earlier was fair? What you were right about, what you were wrong about, some of the players that you hit on and then may have missed on? Is that a fair representation of this article?
Yeah. So, I mean, I've talked about many players, but there's some really big wins, like some guys I was talking about in March that you're only hearing analysts talk about now. And frankly, like that's the proof's in the pudding. We'll get into the players, but go look up Travis Sykora mentions, or how much he was talked about on Twitter X back in March. It's basically just me. Like, it's kind of tricky to find stuff about. Even today, his hype is still ascending. We'll talk about that, but you're seeing a lot more love, a lot more universal hype. I got thoughts about him and some of these other guys, and then here's the thing: when it comes to prospects and young players in general, I don't think like misses or busts, like that kind of stuff gives you clicks. But for the most part, anyone not named Graham Ashcraft or Graham Pauley, it's like, anyway, if your name's Graham, maybe I'm out on you for basically ever. But a lot of these other guys we're going to talk about, it can just prospect development is not linear, and injuries happen. And people, when they think about injuries, they think about, oh, he was on the IL and then 15 days went by and then now he's off the IL. He is healthy now. Not actually how humans work, It sounds funny, but my church softball league, I kind of blew my arm out a little bit. I haven't gotten it checked up because I don't play for a big league team and I'm just busy doing stuff. Anyway, so I'm playing through it. I'm not throwing the way I was at some point, a few months back. Now in the big leagues, they play more and they play harder and they have more serious injuries, and they'll play through it and they won't always play as well as they maybe could have. And we'll talk about a guy like Nolan Jones. I'm not sure how you want to get into this, man, but essentially, I'm just trying to show our audience today, some great things about listening to us, and then some learning moments. Which, frankly, I mean, some analysts do this, some people do this, some guys don't though, and it's easier not to, especially easier not to talk about the misses or the things that didn't pan out this year.
Yeah, I want us to start actually with the misses, because after I went through some of the names you have, there are some exciting names that I think we really need to bring up for the listener to gauge whether people are trying to buy low this offseason or if we're out, right? And a couple of these guys you were really big on and I was really big on. First one I had really liked and didn't get enough shares of that you have listed is Paulino Santana for Texas. And I think with the hype around him, we would classify him as kind of a disappointment. Jesus Made, Pena, Rodriguez, some of the guys in the DSL, a lot of them from Milwaukee's organization, absolutely tore it off the front page. But Santana, kind of quiet, but flashed some likable statistics, and you have those listed in the article. 20 stolen bases in 53 games. The OBP at 465, 0 home runs, though, for a guy that was touted as a big, strong guy. What do you think about Santana long term?
Well, it's definitely the guy I wanted to start off my misses with, because there are, as you just pointed out, some very serious mitigating factors, some redemption. He's only 17 years old, folks.
Yeah.
And anything near a 500 OBP is fantastic. And clearly he's fast, but he's 6'2", he's 180 pounds. The idea was we were getting basically one of the more polished guys out there. He was viewed by some, I think maybe including Pipeline, to be the number 2 guy after Leo DeVries. And, I like the fact he was bilingual. It's going to make him, it's going to help. It won't hurt when he's trying to learn from American coaches, right? You don't have to have the translator there necessarily. You can pick up things a little easier. This is just something maybe people don't think about, but I'm going to fast track you. He's gotten Julio Rodriguez comps for that. I think they were both bilingual coming over, which, I mean, that worked out at least initially. And hey, even with Julio's struggles right now, coming from the DSL and becoming even present Julio Rodriguez, that's okay. That's a pretty good outcome. You're a major leaguer. Congrats. Here's the problem. the DSL is extremely hitter friendly. The fact that this big dude playing amongst children and has 0 home runs, that's weird. I don't know what's going on there. I wonder if he's hurt. I wonder if something's wrong with his, maybe he can't, maybe he was like me in my first game back from softball. I don't know. But it seems like a extreme lack of power. You couldn't get one. What does that mean moving forward? And so with that in mind, it's a major red flag, and it does damage his stock regardless because, first of all, everyone runs in the DSL, so the 20 stolen bases in 53 games, while good to see, not really moving the needle for me as much as the homers would, and there's no homers at all, which is so frustrating. That said, I'm excited for the future. I think it's a good time if you're in super deep leagues, knock on the door, and you can probably get him for nothing. He's a fun lottery ticket, and as Ross Jensen likes to say, our boss, he, power can be often the last thing that develops with a prospect.
Yeah, and at 17 years old, who knows, right? Like, I agree with you. A little bit concerning with no home runs, but it could be as simple as the swing didn't translate to games. He gets to complex, and all of a sudden, boom, right? They tap into it. Do a little adjustment here, a little adjustment there. This next name on the list is one you kind of mentioned earlier. I am going to take a guess you're not acquiring, and that's Graham Pauley. Long term, what do you think?
I'm scared for him, dude. I'm like, what's this guy's? What's going on? I'm not sure I've ever seen anything like this. So he shows us like a 2020 flash and upside with like a decent approach at the plate in 2023 across a few levels. He actually starts 2024 with the Padres, getting a bit of a kind of a weird utility bench opportunity. Then he gets demoted to AAA. Didn't really get a full, he didn't do that well. Obviously, did not do well at the MLB level. Machado came back. It was kind of almost a necessity that he got sent down. But then he struggled big time, batting like 228 at AAA. Gets traded to the Marlins very quietly. And then they sent him down to AA. I don't know why I've seen that. MLB to AAA to AA in a season. And
reverse regression.
Dude. Yeah. And then he goes and puts another he's got basically another 230 batting average line at AA. Dude, this guy's brain is broken right now. I just mean that's a way of me saying he needs a reset. Am I out? You're 23 years old. I'm not completely out. But he's gone from a guy who I was pretty excited on as a sneaky top 100 guy. I think that there was a lot of buzz starting to come up around him as an underrated prospect. Yeah, at this point, if he can be a career utility man, that's a win, and that means I bet you he'll be like that. I bet you his upside might be a Kevin Pillar kind of guy. That's his upside now, which is like he'll have some hot stretches. He will be added if he can make it in the bigs, but he needs a complete reset and figure out what the heck happened.
Okay, so Kevin Pillar, he's more of Kevin Pillar than he would be, say, Paul DeJong.
Paul DeJong's maybe a blend. I'm thinking of a guy who
I agree with you because Paul DeJong at times is a top 10 shortstops.
He's built a career, real strong career, and I guess Pillar has too. But
Pillar doesn't flash the elite upside that I think DeJong does. And don't get me wrong, DeJong has also 40% strikeout rate while he's playing elite at times. So it's not like he is Ronald Acuna, but he definitely provides, I think, a more elite upside because Pillar, like you were saying, in and out of the waiver wire, right? Like if you catch him on the right week, on the right team, you might get 6 starts out of him. And that's important.
Yeah, at this point, he's on the Marlins. I guess you want to look for some upside. They don't really that's not good for developing his bat, but it is good for opportunity. If he gets hot, they'll give him a shot. So we'll see what happens. But as of right now, we can kind of forget about him.
Next name on the list is, as you have quoted, this is a fun miss. And honestly, we both would have this gentleman on our lists as well. I would too. Next, you heard quoted as saying, I never assumed Jackson Merrill, who is the player I'm talking about here, would be bad at all. I just figured he'd be a lot more boring. You go on to say a little bit more, and then you kind of say, quoted, I figured him and Brooks Lee might be a little similar in that regard. Because I agree with you. I always thought Merrill would probably be like a Brooks Lee, a better player than he was a fantasy guy, not much of a value, but like a really good gamer who was a starter. And about 2 months into the season, I was like, well, I was completely wrong about that. What were your thoughts about Merrill in 2024? And maybe what do you think you misidentified?
I mean, it just goes to show. Yeah, so everything you said is what I wrote. So obviously, I agree. I said early, if you the receipts are there, folks. I still had him in my top 100, but I had him way down. I said, listen, I'm an OBP supremacist. He's not gonna start off as an OBP guy. This year, he's still not really an OBP guy. It's in the 320s. But as a 21-year-old in MLB, I'm wondering if, okay, maybe his hit tool is so good that it will elevate that OBP into the 330, 340, Kerry Carpenter kind of range, where it's like, oh, you're mashing 25 bombs, you're hitting, dude. I don't know what it is right now, but Merrill's last time I checked was above a 290 batting average. If you're in a batting average only league, I said in my rankings he's going to be way more of an asset. And yeah, he's way more of an asset. But it doesn't really matter. If your league does not take into account batting average at all, it's just OBP. That's somewhat of a hit. But here's the thing: if you're hitting that ball, if you're making that much contact, because that's often what batting average represents. I do think it's an underrated stat. It's gone from overrated to everyone, all these like experts, quote unquote, will now just knock and ignore batting average. No, it means something. You're swinging the bat. You're getting on base with, with your hitting ability. So it is very useful. And if you can do that with some power, which I've also said was his X factor, I said, I'm seeing 15 to 20 home run power. That's okay. He'll be useful, but it won't be that exciting. Well, he's showing that he has more than that. And that's, I guess, where I was wrong was, it was just not expecting it out of a 20-year-old, not expecting it out of this guy. But hey, when you see an organization, and this is something I do like to believe in, and it really does depend on the organization. If it's this organization, if you are watching this, I'm wearing a St. Louis Cardinals shirt. maybe don't trust them. But if it's a good organization at developing hitters, and they are flying him up to the bigs in a hurry, putting him out at a new position like outfield when Merrill had always played shortstop, from what I understand, trusting him with that responsibility, well, then I guess we should probably adjust our ranks accordingly and trust that there's going to be some kind of growth there. So, yeah, Jackson Merrill, a fun miss. I mean, we're looking at a guy who's almost certainly going to hit 300. That's a crazy thing to say. He's almost certainly, in my mind, going to hit 300 batting average in his career at some point for a season. If anyone can do that at any point in time, you're an elite hitter and you deserve some respect. I'm excited for his future.
Yeah, I like what you said. And from my perspective, where I had Merrill wrong, I misjudged the Padres' track record and history of promoting guys. If you look at just some of the names that they traded to Washington, you talk about Mackenzie Gore, did not really work out. They had him up and aggressively placed at certain levels at young age and then had to drop him down because of loss of mechanics. CJ Abrams was brought to the major leagues, really struggled. That concerned me. And I just assumed that Jackson Merrill was going to be one and the same, much like Pauley, where they'd bring him up and it would be like, hey, he was super overmatched. He was always aggressively placed in the minor leagues. He had never really flashed elite potential. And okay, back down. Whereas I should have been more willing to think of Merrill as somebody that had not yet stopped developing some of those really elite tools because of his age. And that's something that I'll be more mindful of in the future. Much like a Jackson Chourio from Milwaukee this year, where he struggled for the first couple of months. And then it's like, oh, well, keep running him out there. He has a major league contract, an extension already signed. And then boom, he hits his stride. Like he starts to figure it out. And it's like, well, they're young. They still have development. Whereas you have a player that we're going to talk about here in a minute. It's like, well, that development is kind of starting to tick down because of the age. So definitely keep in mind on that moving forward in future years, just age to major league level debut. Doc, next name on the list is one of my Milwaukee Brewers, and big disappointment for the organization so far. And I think disappointment for both of us as well. And there's something that I definitely want us to talk about because we had, I think, glossed over it in the offseason. But this would be Brock Wilken, third baseman, Milwaukee, played almost the entirety of the year at AA. What are your thoughts on his season and his future outlook?
So you mentioned his age. And so I think most people assume that Wilken is older than he is. So he is 22 now, but he's a fresh 22. He played most of this year as a 21-year-old. Here's the thing. This is one of the weirdest guys to evaluate right now. I came into the season hot with Brock Wilken. I put him one slot higher than Dylan Cruz. That was an error. That said, his face got mashed by a heater real early. He's played the full season after that, missed a bunch of time, with a face mask. Like, this is not a normal year. You have some legitimacy in kind of, giving him a pass on this one. That said, you can't give the whole thing a pass. It's still concerning that he's got like a 200 Mendoza batting average in Double-A. And now the power's there. He's got almost 20 home runs. Like, you're seeing it. The raw strength is there. But obviously, this is a situation where if we don't see any improvement next year, and frankly, there's been such a lack of showing this year that his value has dropped like a rock. And hopefully, frankly, I think he's a buy. I think he is a buy in dynasty leagues because his value will likely not be anywhere near where his upside is. And I will point this out as a mitigating factor. Because of him playing most of this year at Double-A, we don't give Double-A the respect that it deserves, but he played 107. Sorry, let's just go here. Yes, 107 games, but let's just do 448 plate appearances were against older pitchers. 22 were against younger. That's not a small thing. I mean, he's clearly playing he still is young for the level. He's entering his age 22 year now. I mean, like, it's the end of the year. Next year will be mostly age 22 year, turning 23 somewhere in the season. And out of those 22 plate appearances, by the way, I mean, out of those 22 plate appearances, he has a 364 OBP and a couple of home runs. So I think there's something here. I know there's something here. Not every prospect you're going to find is going to have 40 home run upside. So you can't teach that. What you can hopefully teach and hopefully get him back to is that OBP. I think what we have to. I was hoping he would be maybe a 250, 260 batting average guy with like a 350 plus OBP would be really cool peak outcome. I still think a 350 OBP is possible, but we might be looking at more of like a Brent Rooker kind of guy here. Like, we're just going to have to accept there's going to be quite a bit of striking out. And his batting average, if it's like a 230 to 240, we're happy with it, with all the home runs and RBIs he's generating. That's the new look, which it's interesting. I think it's interesting that people have kind of even after he was drafted, a lot of people are like, "Oh, he's a first baseman." I'm like, maybe, but they still keep trotting him out at third base. And third base in fantasy isn't exactly what it used to be. So Brock Wilken, I had him at a top 20 prospect. He can't be there for me now. I'm going to be working on my ranks over the next week or two to see where he falls in. But yeah, it's tough because I see that upside. But you give me Mendoza in Double-A, baby, we're going to have a problem. So Brock Wilken, lot to prove. Really weird year. I like the kid. I like his spirit. I like his build. I like his upside.
Yeah, you brought up the face mask, and that's a huge piece of this. Those of you that remember, or those of you that do not remember, Giancarlo Stanton getting hit in the face by a Mike Fiers fastball in Milwaukee, I would argue altered the course of his career pretty significantly, coming off an MVP, perennial home run, either leader or challenger. That fastball hits Giancarlo in the face and changes his stance, puts on the face guard. Everything changed. And Wilken came back, I think, this year quicker than we expected. There were some that thought this might be season ending for Brock Wilken. And he was back, I think, it was almost like a month, maybe 6 weeks.
Yeah, less than 6 weeks.
Yeah, he was back quick. And I can't imagine that didn't impact his season, right? Like, there weren't few nerves within him. I mean, he struck out 133 times. It was a 28% strikeout rate. And this was what you and I were excited about coming out of 2023's Wake Forest season. 31 home runs in 66 games. He batted .345 with an on-base percentage of .506. We were talking about, hey, that is better than Nick Kurtz. At least I was saying that. You and I had that discussion with Ross. And the big thing in that season in 2023 was he had more walks than strikeouts. It's 69 walks to 58 strikeouts. So we saw extreme regression this year, and I have to think that was possibly because of the hit in face, right? And you brought it up too, age to level and what he was actually facing. I think it will also be interesting. Luke Adams' development from Milwaukee, a huge on base percentage guy, is starting to tap into his power, starting to bring his average up a little bit. Does Milwaukee re-sign Willie Adames? Does that mean Joey Ortiz stays at third? There's a lot of moving pieces, but to your point, those are selling pieces if you want to go out and buy him this offseason. And I think he's definitely worth the waiver wire with the excitement we had on him.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say that, like, how many people are out there are actually looking at that stat? I've heard no one mention that. People aren't really talking about Wilken right now. Then he's only basically faced like this many players who are at his age or younger, and he did really well against them, right? Like, even in this quote unquote lost year. I mean, it's a lost year. I'll say it, but it's a lost year. You know what? Is it though? I remember you were talking with Ross. I listened to your fantastic podcast, by the way. You
liked it, huh? Ross is fantastic.
I listened the other day. Yeah, it was really good. Made my wife listen to it too. We were in the car together. So
I'm sure she loved that.
No, yeah, she loved it. You said something along the lines of, if a guy doesn't face adversity
yes,
till he gets to the major league level, I'm kind of concerned. Yeah. And dude, what's this year? What's this year for Brock?
Great
Wilken?
point.
You got it, buddy. You got your adversity. So if he can overcome this, I'm excited for him. It's going to be an interesting second year. This is his first full year in the minors. Some guys, as we talked all this year, take many years to break out. I'm hoping it doesn't take a 25 to 28-year-old breakout for Wilken, but if it does, hey man, still could have a great, fantastic career. We may have moved on by then, a lot of us GMs, but he could have a fantastic career. We'll see what happens.
Well, and just before we move on, I love the name you threw out there, because that's kind of what I view Wilken, and I didn't really allude to it when I mentioned his age, because he did turn 22 in June. So he is a young 22, as you said. I can just see him taking a little bit longer to develop. Milwaukee will give him time because of the names that I threw out there. They have pieces that will play right now. And I could see him being Brett Rooker, 26, 27, maybe 28 is when he really has that big season. Former first-round pick that finally makes good on being a first-round pick. Always had the power, finally puts it in gameplay, finally brings the average together. And that's okay. Like, Brett Rooker is still very, very, very valuable in dynasty leagues right now, because it's a 3 to 4 year window for a lot of people. So yeah, absolutely. I still think acquire, and you're on the acquire train as well, right?
Yes. I mean, especially at this current value.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Next name, big disappointment. There's nothing really to gloss over. Victor Scott was where we had him, the excitement levels that we had him. What I chose not to trade him for personally, that I laughed at offers, kind of embarrassed me now. What are your thoughts on his 2024 season? And then looking forward, do you think he can ever make good on what we thought he was going to be?
Oh, yeah, man. I mean, no, there was a turning point where things looked good, and it was when he actually did something, right? It wasn't an accident. Changed his batting stance late in the season pretty dramatically to tap into some of that athleticism, as he said. Tigers take the lead in the 10th inning. Not great. We'll talk about that. Well, not great if you like the Royals, and I do. Tigers can make the playoffs, folks. We'll talk about that later, perhaps, if we have time. But the Victor Scott situation, that is – he started clicking and doing really well at AAA, so they brought him up. Mike Ciani got hurt. Victor Scott did okay. He hit a couple bombs at the major league level. He kind of flashed a little bit of like, oh, there is some kind of bat here. Oddly enough, when he got on base, he wasn't running, which I don't know if that's a him thing or a Marmol thing. But the Cardinals should be in the playoffs right now, in my opinion. And I think they have some soul searching to do this offseason, because they just got swept or they lost the series to the Blue Jays. And if they had swept that series or won it at the very least, after showing some overcoming adversity with the Yankees and Padres, like hanging in there with some big teams, you lose to the Blue Jays. That team is just a weird team this year. It's not working out. We'll see what happens, but I wouldn't be surprised if they have a new manager next year, maybe even a whole head of operations, maybe even an overhaul of the development. Victor Scott, still, like I said, why is he showing pop? And now when he gets on base, you're not letting him run, or he's not running. I don't really know what happened there, but I I cannot have Victor Scott as a top 20 prospect, obviously. But I see a lot of upside here. I see more upside with him than Chandler Simpson. Because Chandler Simpson is a fun guy. I think
he'll never hit home runs. Yeah.
You're not getting – there's like basically zero chance of home runs or like maybe even doubles. I don't know, right? Now he's got a great approach. Better approach than Victor Scott? Maybe. He's been old for his levels. We'll see what happens. Older, I think. I'm going to go look and see how old he is. Make sure that's not just some kind of thing I'm thinking. But that was a thing. He was at like high A at one point as a 23-year-old, I think. But yeah, Chandler Simpson, yeah, he is now, he's almost 24 years old, and he did a lot of his damage against high A. Got a lot of those stolen bases there. Yeah, 31 stolen bases in 32 games. Unbelievable. Basically a stolen base a game. So he's that kind of guy. I will venture out to say that you're going to get a better OBP from Chandler Simpson. But yeah, you're not really seeing any power. Whereas Victor Scott, if you can get like that 10 to 15 home run power with like up to 50 stolen bases, maybe more. I mean, at this point, we're just like, dude, 40, like whatever. Just like go out there, steal bases every time you play. Whatever that is. If you're a part-time player, whatever, you can be so useful to us. We'll see what happens. I'm buying low. He's very similar to me in terms of how I see Brock Wilken. Like so much upside in certain categories here. And I don't think and here's the big thing. I don't think he's a Billy Hamilton where it's like he's going to be hitting so poorly he's out of the league. I think he needs a proper opportunity. He was rushed up after 66 AA games. We're seeing the gap between AAA and major leagues this year. About 66 games at AA. We're the guy who we don't even like really know how good his hit tool really is. Like maybe clearly it needed some development. So 66 games at AA to the major leagues. He struggles, and we're all just basically saying, bye-bye, your career is over. I don't think so, man. He's a defensive wizard, by the way, so that's going to buy him some time.
Yeah, and we saw Pete Crow Armstrong really struggle with the bat in Chicago, but Chicago stuck with him after the second promotion. And we haven't seen that with Victor Scott. As you said, a regime change is probably imminent in St. Louis. And honestly, I'm not a Cardinals fan because I'm a Milwaukee fan, but I do root for good organizational philosophy. And everyone in St. Louis should be fired. I mean, it's been embarrassing what they've done with Victor Scott and Jordan Walker. And I think the fan base in general, which I have also kept pretty decent thumb on, is angry. Like you're pissing off your customers.
Mm-hmm.
And it's time to change because you have some really talented pieces that you can't just let go. Like you said it, Victor Scott is a great outfielder. Okay, well, at least get him out there for his defense, right? Like Jordan Walker had shown really good success at the major league level. So hopefully we see those changes, and hopefully those changes lead to the reemergence of the Victor Scott and his value. Two left. I'm going to jump over Graham Ashcraft.
Just real quick, I think that Graham Ashcraft was always like a flyer. I never said he's going to be this top guy. He was just like, hey, if you're in a deeper league, you want some rotation depth. Nobody's taking him for some reason. And turns out there's a really good reason for that. Dude, he looks like he could be like a 2022 Miles Michaelis type for me. Like grinding quality starts, grinding some okay ratios. You know what I'm saying? Like,
he throws 100-mile-an-hour cutter with a plus slider. Like, this should be a guy that fights for Cy Youngs, and he's just bad.
Yeah, and I'm just like, it even has like a floor of like, you're just grinding out, like, because frankly, this the way he doesn't miss bats. I'm like, because he's bottoming out as a starter, it's really bad because he's not missing bats enough to be in the bullpen really, other than like a mop-up guy, I guess. Frankly, it's like don't send him, but like he's going to end up overseas. Miles Michaelis had to do that till he was in his 30s. Then he came back. Eric Fedde, another success story of like, that's where you're going to have to work it out, buddy. And so Graham Ashcraft, without spending much time on him, yeah, probably not someone you have to think about for a while, but there's something there. If you can hit 100, he's like the most disappointing triple digit pitcher that you can think of.
I could see him having 1 or 2 seasons, either, right before 30 or right as he passes the age of 30, where he's just remarkable. A top 30 pitcher, puts it together. I just feel like he's going to fall into that kind of classification.
He's only 26.
Seth Lugo, maybe, like, because Lugo took, he was in the bullpen, he was in the rotation, he was in the bullpen rotation, right? Like Lugo's like 36.
Mm-hmm.
Not the same profile because Lugo's more control, but I could see him being a value. I don't know when, because the stuff is there. He falls apart. And I've watched a number of his starts. It really is. It's either like good, 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 terrible inning, or terrible first inning, decent, decent, gets into pitch, pitch issues with too many pitches.
Yeah.
And pitch count issues. And it's frustrating. It's a really frustrating profile because he could be a breakout in a year. So I don't dislike him, having coming into the year, having you liked him. Okay, last one of the disappointing guys, and this is Nolan Jones. So not a good year, a lot of injuries, could not live up to the draft price. I think you took him in TGFBI, if I remember correctly. Is that right?
Yeah, I took him there. I had him other leagues already too. Yeah.
What do
You
you
want me to
think?
talk
What
about?
do you
You
think
want me to talk
long?
about Nolan Jones? You got something to say about Nolan Jones?
I kind of saw this coming, but I wasn't positive. I could have been really wrong had he continued on his success last year. I'm not happy that he disappointed. But I want to hear what you're thinking long term. Or is this somebody that you want to go out and you want to acquire shares of, or do you think he's unfortunately just going to be looked at as a guy that had one good year in 2023?
I guess I'll ask you this: did you see this coming? Did you think that he would have no power and no speed and no hitting and become basically a garbage baseball player?
Yes.
Really? That
Yep.
would be your prediction. If someone had asked you on Twitter, if on X, if they said, give me your line for Nolan Jones this year, you would predict this line?
Not this line. I would have expected 12 to 18 home runs with like a 180 batting average.
180. Well, 180 means he's out of he's in the minors again.
Well, and that would have been my fear, that he wouldn't have been playing. I just assumed the strikeouts were going to come back and really flare up. I would have assumed he would have had a 35 to 40% strikeout rate and been unusable. Like I've never bought what he did last year because it was so streaky, because primarily at home, and because of his lack of progression throughout the Indian system. Like he never flashed any superstar production with the Indians. And then all of a sudden we see arguably his best professional season with Colorado last year. And I rostered him in a number of leagues, and it was infuriating because at times you would think, okay, here comes the breakout, like 2-3 games, a home run, stolen base, a home run. And then it would be 10 days of just strikeout after strikeout after strikeout after 0 for 4s. And that to me is a concern going into the next year, because that means that people knew how to get you out. And the likelihood is your home runs were just mistakes as opposed to consistency throughout. Now, with that being said, I did a couple redraft or a couple dynasty startup drafts. I did take Nolan Jones in the teen rounds.
Yeah. But the thing is, you're not taking him there if you don't think there's upside.
I do think there's future upside, but I think it's more or less in like a trade chip. I think you can convince people if he has one more cycle, even if it's a 3 or 4 day stretch, that, hey, he's back. And that in itself should return more value than the value that I took him at.
Yeah, I mean, I think that if I would have loved to see those predictions before the season. I just don't buy it because I know Ross Jensen was really out on Nolan Jones, but he wasn't like what you're saying. He was more like, yeah, he's like, he'll be good, but like a 230, 240, 250 might be more realistic for a batting average. He'll probably hit 20 plus home runs, but it'll be it'll be greasier. We're not going to get these numbers. And that's the thing. I viewed that as the floor, right? I'm like, okay, maybe he's more of the second half 300 hitter, maybe 30, 25 upside. It's like, I saw that was there. He proved it was there. He did 2020 and 300 at bats or something crazy. You don't do that by accident. Like, you have to have something there. And he plays at Coors, so that could be a something, right? 25-year-old breakout or 24, whatever it was.
So here, I'm going to read this to you because this is why I said what I said. So in 2021, Nolan Jones at AAA for Cleveland, 99 games, 13 home runs, batted 238. In that season, he had 10 stolen bases. So if you translate that to the major league level, that's you're not going to hit 238 if you're not even hitting over 238 AAA. You're going to be hitting 10, 200, 190, 180, 13 home runs, like 99 games. You're going to be lucky to hit 10 at the major league level. In 22, he had 55 games before promotion, hit 276, so really bumped that up. Nine home runs.
With a 368 OBP, which looks pretty sharp.
And that's good. Yeah. I mean, even a 356 OBP in 2021. So the OBP, I mean, you look at his track record, his OBP has been really good. Yeah. Like there's nothing to argue against that. But the average, the power and the speed have never flashed except in 2023. His most home runs professionally and his most stolen bases professionally. His most stolen bases by 2x professionally. Like that's how crazy his line was.
But his savant backs that up. It's almost 80th percentile speed. Like he's fast.
Okay, and that's fair.
Yeah.
Like future progression of possible stolen bases. Like
it's just someone saying run, so don't run, right?
Like, yeah. Yeah. Well, and his place in the order too, I think, is interesting there too. I can't look back that far when you look at his AAA, but I would bet you that Cleveland had him 3-4 in the order with the expectation that he was 6'4" and he's a power hitter, right? Because his raw power has always been talked about. It was his game power that was always grading out poorly. But I guess my last point is just he showed it to us last year, yes, but to me it was so inconsistent that I needed to see it again before I bought in. And it kind of sucks because 2024, I don't even know. Like this is a lost year, like we talked about with Wilken. I think it's a lost year for Jones. Like next year will really be the test for me.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, that goes without saying. I just think it's so freakish. It's such an intense backward step that you can't ignore all these. Remember what happened, man? Like, so he started off and it was March in Colorado, frigid cold. So,
yeah. Cold.
Whatever. Yeah. And then he messes his back up pretty bad, misses significant time, comes back, misses more time. And I could have sworn there were other injuries too, other than the back. I don't remember what they even are anymore. But this guy's been banged up all year. This is what I was talking about to start off. You can't, just because a guy's back from IL doesn't mean he's playing healthy. Nolan Jones is out here trying to fight to prove he belongs next year, right? That this wasn't a mistake. And unfortunately, it seems like every game he's playing is like not helping. It's like, maybe just take this one off, buddy. But yeah, it's unfortunate. And now, I mean, frankly, he's entering a weird place now where people are going to remember these injuries. I'm going to remember these injuries. And now I'm like, I don't know if he's a guy who can stay healthy, because back injuries can linger and become a problem. Right. So, Evan Carter's in a weird spot. Similarly, I mean, I could have put him in there as a miss, but that just feels like cruel, because like some guys they're showing they have back conditions that are continuing to pop up and could derail their careers. And thank God Kerry Carpenter seems to be overcoming that right now, and he's getting some action there. But he missed a chunk of time too. Kerry Carpenter, Evan Carter, maybe Nolan Jones is one of those guys. Nootbaar's had some issues with hamstring. Like there's some guys who just keep getting banged up. Michael Massey was like kind of an under the radar guy. Started breaking out, messed his back up. The Royals came out and said his back's always going to be an issue. I'm like, oh, good. This guy who's in his 20s has a back problem. Like, that's going to age well for dynasty leagues. So with Nolan Jones, I think it's an injury thing, and that's not something to, like, ignore. But I just think his career going from, like you said, if you wanted to look at one number that was consistent in his whole career, it's OBP. And that's not even there this year. Like, he's not putting it together, and I think it's a wash. He's trying to – the fact that he has 3 home runs in 71 games. We know he has huge power, and he just showed us. And he plays in Coors. It's something seriously wrong, and that doesn't mean you shouldn't knock him in your rankings. But it means I'm willing to give him a do-over for the right price. It's not going to be at the price that he went for this last offseason.
Yeah, and that's something that I always put into the equation too. I seem to get really more confident in my dismay towards a player if the price is super high. Like, because I just get frustrated with the industry where I'm like, what do you guys are seeing the wrong thing? And his price was a top 3 round pick. Like, it was scary how high he was going. And the risk that was attached to that was terrifying to me, because as I said, I would have been okay being wrong on him. If he came out and hit 40 home runs with a 280 batting average and a 380 OBP this year, I'd be like, well, I was wrong. But the risk was if you take a third, maybe he's a 4th round pick and he comes out and he hits 220, 210, 230 with 15 home runs and 16 stolen bases, but 10 caught stealings. It's like, oh my God, that's huge. That's going to destroy you. I think it's interesting when you look at, he had a 25 game stretch at A ball and AAA this season, which were probably rehab assignments or maybe just sent down to shake off the cobwebs. But 276 average with a 400 on base percentage, 5 home runs, 31 strikeouts to 15 walks, more strikeouts than you'd like, but at least he was 2-1. Those were kind of the numbers that I think everyone would have been happy with at the major league level. So I think 2025, there's a chance that he bounces back. And what do you think for draft price? Are you thinking maybe the 20s? Or are you thinking he's like a 2nd or 3rd or last round of the draft type of player?
I'm probably going to let someone else draft Nolan Jones now. I think if I'm looking at it for startups, if I'm looking for dynasty purposes, if I'm looking to make a deal with a guy who owns Nolan Jones and maybe just throw him in for basically nothing, that's a good idea. I think it's a good idea to buy low. I don't think it's a good idea. Yeah, I mean, it's just impossible for me to tell you because leagues and formats change. Their depth changes from league to league. And so it's hard for me to say an exact number of round, but you'll find a spot where you look around and you say, okay, Nolan Jones did this in 300 at-bats in 2023. And so I know his upside. His upside is tangible. Can these other guys who are available right now, can they match that upside, yes or no?
2025 on the board, need an outfielder, Jordan Walker or Nolan Jones.
Oh, Jordan... That's it. Jordan, it's so interesting, man. It's so tough because like Jordan Walker, it's like
very tough. One doesn't
Jordan
steal.
Walker with like it's funny that they're doing so terribly right now. But Jordan Walker with the Orioles is like, oh, easy Jordan Walker, but it's like, what the frig are these Cardinals gonna do to him?
Jordan Walker with the Orioles,
yeah. Jordan Walker and the Yankees, okay.
Jordan Walker with Jordan Walker with the A's 1st round pick.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, it's Yeah. Anyway, so it's tough to say right now, but I mean, I really am adverse to injury-prone guys, and I picked up. I like all these guys, all those guys I listed with like the chronic injuries. I'm like, I own those guys, and I love those guys. They just happen to all be these chronic injury guys, and I didn't know when I first bought into them, but they're rearing their heads as those guys. We'll see who can overcome.
Yeah, that's a good point. I had a notion of always try to stay away from the injury guys because they're going to just continue to get hurt. Okay. So that kind of wraps the, what was maybe incorrect or maybe what happened with some of the guys that you were excited about, right? Because I think that we documented a lot of variables with each one of those as to why maybe it went awry. But let's talk about some of the fun guys now, some of the guys that you were correct on. And starting off with one that you were really excited about, one that I think you, more than most people, were hyping in the industry, is actually a guy that my buddy Richie was really excited about as well coming out of the draft. Got me kind of looking into him a little bit, and then you kind of pumped him a little bit more. It's Travis Sykora, starting pitcher for the Washington Nationals, pitching at A ball most of the season this year. As of late, has absolutely been dominating. This is a 6'6", 232-pound fireballer, as you have listed. It's actually, quote-unquote, Texas fireball blasting triple digits with his starters mix, which I think perfectly sums him up. What do you think of him long-term, his value currently in fantasy, and what did you see coming into the year that got you excited?
Yeah, so I mean, it was Richie. You look up in March, he was talking about Sykora. It's me, it's Richie, Polar Bear from the Dynasty Guru, Brian Labuddy, dude's from Kentucky. I don't think he knows how to say his own name. In French, that would be Labude. Laboudet. I think he calls himself Labuddy, which is way cooler, I guess. It's definitely very Southern. So Travis Sykora, though, also Southern from Texas. And yeah, he's a Texas fireballer. He loves Nolan Ryan. He's like a good, wholesome kid. You look at this guy, I'm like, yeah, you were definitely homeschooled, buddy. Like, he's got like the buttons here. But he's 6'6", 232. And, he's got that good, innocent kind of kid vibe to him. But then he's out here saying, I want to prove to the Nationals they didn't make a mistake. I want to prove to these other teams they did make a mistake. I'm like, okay, so you have both worlds here. You have like good moral fiber, perhaps, maybe a good, respectable young man. And then you also have the edge, and you have him blasting. He can reach up to triple digits with that fastball. But the crazy thing is, his fastball is not actually what's flashing the most right now. It's this weird splitter changeup he's throwing out there. It's mid-80s, and it's just getting guys missing it's missing bats. The fastball's missing bats. And then the slider's missing bats. He's getting whiffs with all three. Oh, three, like, it's one thing to say you have a 3-pitch mix or a 4-pitch mix, but sometimes it's like, okay, you have like one really good thing, a second, okay, pretty solid thing to keep them off balance, and you got a couple others to keep guys off their toes. No, this is like 3 really good pitches, and that's exciting because he's super young. I believe he's still a teenager, 19.
Yeah, I want to say he's still 19.
Yeah, so, well, if you want to say it, then we'll say it. But, yeah, and so he's got the build that I love as a starter, this big kid, and the Nationals are really starting. He's actually he's 20 now. So he came out of high school weird, I guess, because he was a high schooler, and this is his first season. Somehow he's 20 already. But it doesn't really matter. I mean, I would like to see him move up levels. He's been doing this at low A, just destroying this competition. We need to see him at higher levels.
Tim, he was an old draft pick, huh? Because he turned 20 in into April.
Yeah, I don't really know, but I don't really care. It's like
pitchers. Yeah, it doesn't matter.
They go till they're 40. That's what we're just talking about. Seth Lugo, like Ashcraft can break out at 34, like whatever. And frankly, if you break out on like you're like at 32, 33, 34, 35, probably not. But those early to mid 30s, like as a pitcher, when they break out, I'm like, oh, cool. I probably still have you for 5 years in dynasty purposes. So
who I could see Ashcraft actually being? Kevin Gausman.
That's weird because Gossman's pretty young still, right?
No, Gossman's 33.
Oh, we're old.
We're old, dude.
That's what happened.
Yeah, we're old. But
that's what happened. I was playing fantasy when he was a rookie. Yeah, okay.
I'm just gonna fact he's 33. So, what's funny? He's close to our realm. January 6th.
That's so funny. No, see, yes, that's exactly it. He was born 20 days before me, so that's why he's young to me. No, he's just a kid.
It's the inner child in us, yeah.
Anyone sticking around for 50 minutes in our podcast is getting rewarded with some good stuff. Here's some gold. But yeah, Sykora, man. I mean, future.
So where do you think you're going to put him? You wrote in the article you're moving him up top 5 pitching prospect. Okay,
it's so hard right now. I gotta look at who's qualifying for what. Like, what's a prospect? But what do I have? Like off the top of my head, I'm probably gonna miss someone. Horton slips back because of this weird injury thing. Like I just haven't seen enough, and he's struggling to play. But Job and Painter are up there. Quinn Matthews is up there. Sykora's up there. Thomas White's up there.
What about Bubba Chandler? Would you toss him in the top 5?
I mean, yeah, it's gonna be an interesting competition. So I'll have to go ahead and break down some numbers. But I mean, he's definitely in that wheelhouse. He's in that conversation. And and the only thing holding him back from being he's 100% is he's only at low A. Move him up. That's the Nationals. They're babying him. It's kind of annoying, but hey, he's going to start at high A next year. And frankly, if he crushes them, I am confident they'll put him in double A. And these days, if you're in double A, teams are showing that they're willing to throw you into the fire in the big leagues. So,
do you remember them doing this same thing with Lucas Giolito?
I don't know.
They babied him too, and I think once he came up, it was because they knew something that we didn't, which was his stuff actually, high velocity may not have been as good as it was. They traded him to the White Sox, so they clearly were willing to get rid of him. But this thing with Sykora is frustrating, but I mean, he dominated. It was an absolute domination this season. Overall, 85 total innings, 129 strikeouts, whip at 0.91, 2.33 ERA. I mean, 20 games. This was ridiculous numbers. Okay, so Sykora, big on Sykora now. Next name was one that you also pounded the drum on. I mean, you hit some really good young pitchers coming out of the 2023 first-year player draft. And this next one was, number 1 lefty taken by Miami. That's Thomas White, big, tall kid. Tell me a little bit about Thomas White, what you saw and liked, and then kind of what happened in his 2024 season and where he falls now.
Here's the thing, folks. Here's the thing. It's actually not super tricky. Narrow your focus down to kids who are getting high signing bonuses when they're coming out of high school, especially. Because if that's a team putting their money where their mouth is, that's them showing you what they think. That's an auction draft, for fantasy purposes, an auction draft in real life, right? They're actually willing to pony up for these guys. So that's where I start. Now, they don't all hit, but all three of these first hits, they all got nice signing bonuses. Sykora, White, and the next guy. Now, White is still actually a teenager. He's 19. Actually, so I really held my tongue not to mention this during my spiel about Sykora. But Sykora, his hype has gone big now. Maybe it's because he's so big. Maybe it's because his numbers are freaky. Maybe it's like we like to talk about a Texas fireballer who loves Nolan Ryan. It's a fun, romantic story. White's still 6'5", 210. He's out of Massachusetts, so his arm might be more well-rested, not pitching so much in the cold months. He's a lefty, which is interesting. He can get up there. He's pitching. He hits the upper 90s. I believe he's got a nice slider. He's got a starter's mix. I am not as up to speed on how he's been doing lately, what he's been unlocking. I remember following Twitter about a month or two ago. I can't tell you which pitch it was, but essentially hit one of his third pitch is coming along really nicely. And so that's not the best analysis you're going to hear today, but my life has been busy, so suck it up. I'll tell you what he has been doing, and this is something that I'm standing on here. I'm a little bit, frankly, I'm almost getting a chip on my shoulder. I think I like Sykora as a person. I like his vibe better, but I feel like it's disrespectful to Thomas White that there's so many people hyping up Sykora and overlooking White. It's like, dude, this kid he's actually been in high A for 62 innings, the majority of this year. The Marlins developed pitching really well, so that's another huge plus. They saw that he was crushing low A and didn't waste any time. They put him, and he had a 3.18 ERA in low A. They bumped him up to high A, and it got better. Yeah. Oh, by the way, that's what the best of the best do. Basayo got better at every level he got promoted to. That's why he's a top 2 prospect now. And so, and White, if you don't like ERA, because it's down to a 2.61 now, 2.61, and his whip went from 1.58 to 1.16 in high A. But if you like the fancy stuff like walks and strikeouts, those have improved as well. So the strikeouts is basically the same, but the walks have improved like a good clip, which is nice. 4.5 walks per 9 at low A to 3, dead even at high A. This is a guy who could easily start next year at Double A. What does that mean? I mean, that means next year. I think they're probably likely to slow roll him. He's still a teenager. He'll be starting next year as a 20-year-old. But this is the Marlins organization. They're great at what they do. He's going to be starting. He's going to be in Double A next year at some point. Period. And that means whenever you hit Double A, whenever you're in the upper minors and you start handling your competition, we can start dreaming on a call up to the big leagues, especially if injuries strike, which they do with pitchers. So I'm looking at Thomas White. He's still not being properly valued, folks. They started off the year with Noble Meyer up here, who was drafted top 10 overall draft pick. Thomas White, his hype was not even in the same world. Meanwhile, he was drafted as a first-round compensation pick in the 30s. But you look at their signing bonuses. I think it was a few $100,000 apart. They both got a huge chunk of money, like millions of dollars. You could tell the organization viewed them similarly enough. And White, to add one more thing, was a prodigy. He was blasting 91 at 13 or 14 years old. This is something people don't always talk about. There's a nice article kind of hidden away on MLB, I guess. It's not like it's a rogue site. I found this on MLB.com. Talking about White being a prodigy at 13 or 14 years old, and then COVID hit, and it kind of nerfed his child prodigy shine that we've heard of from other kids coming up, like Bryce Harper, for example, on the hitting side of things. So White, really, he could be straight up. His upside is ace. His upside is a Cy Young guy. I mean, if everything clicks right, long road ahead. One shoulder issue, one elbow issue sets that all back, right? But as of right now, Thomas White, I mean, I have a hard time thinking how could I put him below Travis Sykora? How could I put him below if he's done 62 innings at a higher level, doing just as well?
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's strange because Thomas White coming out of the draft was the top rated prep lefty.
I'm sorry to cut you off. I did not finish my thought. Noble Meyer started off up here. Noble Meyer's season has sucked, and Thomas White is now better. By the way, that was the thought. Sorry to cut you off as you were saying that.
Yeah, no, I was just saying that White was coming into the draft as a top rated prep lefty. And you were right. Good memory with that. Noble Meyer came in with a $4.5 million signing bonus. Thomas White came with 4.1. So to your point, one was the 10th pick, one was the 35th pick, right? You have a big difference in picks, but that was only $400,000 in difference. And Thomas White has surpassed Noble Meyer. And normally it is the lefties who take a little bit longer to develop. The overall season stat for Thomas White is 96 innings, 120 strikeouts, whip at a 1.3, ERA at 2.8. That's split between A ball and high A, as you had mentioned. Did better at high A this season. Younger than Sykora. And I think it's really nice with White when we talk about prospecting and birthdays, because White will turn 20 at the end of this month. So we can look at every season that he's in the minors or in the majors as his year of age season. This was his 19-year-old season. Next year will be his age 20 season, and so on and so forth. Sykora also with a really big signing bonus. You know, you had mentioned you really pay attention to those signing bonuses. Sykora coming in 71st overall pick at 2.6 million. It's a lot of money for where he was in the draft, and kind of screamed volumes for what the Washington Nationals thought of him. Was a Texas commit, as we have talked about in previous podcasts. So really great hits on two of those pitchers. And I know that you're benefiting in a few leagues that you were able to get them with FYPD picks. Next one is not a pitcher. It's going to be a shortstop for Detroit. It's Kevin McGonigle. Really took the minor leagues by storm this year. You and Ross were definitely banging the drum. You were out in front of this one. What are your thoughts on McGonigle?
Yeah, so in one league, I got Sykora and White basically everywhere I wanted, except for our 30-man league. I was about to take Sykora directly after taking White. I had made some trades around there. And so I had to settle for McGonigle, which is like, hey, cool.
So wait, you got White. You didn't get Sykora.
Yeah, it's frustrating because
Okay.
I wanted that league. I offered so many deals for him. He wouldn't budge. It was so frustrating. And then I took McGonigle. He's like, oh, I want McGonigle. I'm like, well, dude, I don't know. So McGonigle, though, great. What is he going to be? You know, is he going to be Nico Horner? Maybe, right? He's like kind of look like last year's Nico Horner. I don't actually know Horner's stats throughout this year. I know he was kind of underwhelming quite a bit early on. But we're looking at a guy with an elite hit tool, and he again got a nice signing bonus. I really like what I saw this year. I saw him hitting the ball like crazy. I know some people were starting to question if he was even better than Max Clark. I never bought into that, but it doesn't matter if you're like in that category of talent. They're clearly friends too, which is cool. And frankly, if they're coming up the minors together, they got promoted on the same day from low A to high A. They're buddies, and that matters because you got this kid coming up as shortstop, Max Clark coming up as a center fielder. They're going to be, the Tigers' future in the two most important defensive positions. So it's really cool that they have chemistry together, especially since the stats are there too. McGonigle had a 326 batting average and a 407 OBP. Only played 14 games at high A. His batting average doesn't look good on paper, but the OBP is high because of his 4 strikeouts to 11 walks. Like, the kid has an elite approach. Hard to teach that. The power is, and he seems to run quite a bit. The power is going to be the X factor from this 5'10", 187-pound guy. He's pretty thick, got a thick neck. This is going to be one of those guys where you're hoping the power is the last thing to develop sort of deal. Tigers Park isn't great for it. Probably want to limit our hopes on that and just be pleasantly surprised. Wyatt Langford homer. Yeah, baby. That's like 3 for 4 tonight. We can talk. Why is that not one of? That's like he can't be in my hit or miss because he's such a weird guy. We have to do a whole podcast on who is Wyatt Langford. And
we will. We'll cover Wyatt Langford at least one of our off-season episodes, or even maybe to wrap 100%. Our season.
I love that he's ending hot, so I can have some arguments. But McGonigle, yeah, man. I mean, here's the deal with him. He had a wrist injury. He broke his hand. Actually, was what it was, and that's not great. And so he's out for the season now. He's going to see some of that really big hype that was happening deflate a little. It's already deflated a little bit now. It's going to deflate more as the season goes on, as the offseason progresses, and we get these new shiny toys. So probably a good time to check in on his value with that GM. Maybe they're worried the power won't come. I don't really care. If you can hit 15 home runs, that'd be awesome. But if you can steal 20 plus stolen bases with like a, 280, 290 batting average, 340 plus OBP, again, like it sounds like Nico Horner last year, right? Like kind of just like it was really off. Like, and frankly, I'm being conservative. I think he could steal more than that. I don't think the homers are going to be more than that, but I think this Tigers offense does have high upside long term. I think that we're looking at a really nice rebuild for these guys, and McGonigle seems like a smart kid with a lot of upside, and I'm sure they can't wait to replace Javi Baez with him. So it's people are talking about Trey Sweeney. I'm like, yeah, Sweeney will fit in, but this is the real answer at shortstop, in my opinion. So McGonigle, really good great real life player, and I think he's going to translate, especially to deep leagues. He'll be a glue guy for championship teams.
Yeah, I love everything you said, and I agree. I mean, think about him and Colt Keith, and you mentioned Max Clark. Hopefully, Spencer Torkelson can get it around. They did end up winning today, Doc. The Mariners are currently losing, so Mariners are a couple games behind them in that wild card. They're obviously trying to chase down a wild card spot as well. This could get a lot more interesting than we expected, and the decision to not trade Scoot Ball could lead to a postseason berth for them, which would be pretty shocking as well. But they did win 3-1. Big loss. I mean, MacArthur is out with an elbow injury, and it looks like they did incur that injury or that mishap today because Lucas Ehrig gave up the runs. So interesting for the Royals. McGonigle, though, when you think of maybe placing him positionally at his prime, I like the Nico Horner comp. Are you thinking maybe top 15 shortstop, roto categories type player? What do you think?
Lots of runs, great ratios, really good stolen bases. It's just going to depend on what that power is. Is it 5 home runs or is it 15 or 20? So 5 to 10 or 15 to 20. That's going to decide his future, and because that'll affect his slugging in general will affect his RBI count. So how good that the Tigers develop too, right? Because that's going to right now the Tigers this year, their counting stats have been depressed by, for most of the year how bad the lineup was, starting to change a little bit. Top 15 shortstop, I think he certainly could be for fantasy. Was Nico Horner a top 15 shortstop for fantasy last year? Yes.
Yeah. I feel like with his prime outcome, yeah, he definitely was. Okay, next couple guys we're gonna do shotgun style, kind of go quick through them. We've got Chase Davis and then Jackson Baumeister. Baumeister now with Tampa after being traded from the Orioles, and Davis being taken by St. Louis in the first round last year. Kind of thoughts on their season so far and projections moving forward.
Yeah, so both guys are super, nobody cares about Jackson Baumeister. And that's the weirder one for me because Mike Aliash, who I know we value Orioles hitters over pitchers, but he also, in his career, he never took a pitcher as high in the draft as Baumeister. So that says something for a start. He was actually, but his deal was in college, he actually had entering the draft had a 5.09 ERA in college. Obviously a red flag. But if they're going out there and spending a pick and this money on him, that says something to me, right? Clearly, and everyone's like, yeah, he's got raw stuff, maybe a reliever risk. And so I got him, in our 30-man, I didn't use a draft pick on him, dude. I got him on this Wild West free-for-all after 6 rounds of drafting in a 30-teamer. That's how low his value was. It doesn't make any sense. I picked him up for free. And so after Caleb Durbin, and so this guy comes in with the Orioles, and they start him off immediately at high 8. Also an intriguing move, right? Skip Lowey because he's old. He's been to college, 21 years old. I mean, I guess 3.06 ERA. It's okay, cool. But he's walking a bunch of guys. 5.5 walks per 9, 11.6 strikeouts per 9. That's what's exciting. That raw stuff. Oh, but then what happens? He gets sent to the Tampa Bay Rays, where they know how to really handle arms. And that's where things – I was excited. And there was a couple people talked about it. I believe Scott Weiss talked about it a little bit. He seems to know his ball. But most people aren't really here. There's no buzz. Since he got traded to the Rays, he's got a 1.24 ERA, a .586 whip. 1 point, and that walk rate's dropped to a 1.6 per nine, and the strikeouts have ticked up to a 13.7. What's going on, guys? What am I missing here? What am I missing? He's going to start next year, maybe at Double A. He's going to get there pretty soon. He's in a great organization for this. It's unbelievable. I think Jackson Baumeister has potential to be a top 10 pitching prospect as soon as next year, and it's not going to be starting next year. But I think at some point people are going to figure this out. I wouldn't be surprised if at some point this offseason, someone who's more famous than me, or maybe I just yap about him enough and other people start noticing him. I think there's going to be some groupthink, and Baumeister is a prime candidate to go way up in stock value in terms of his dynasty stock. This is a guy you want to get right now. If you can trade in your league, do it. Go get him. Add him. He shouldn't be available. He's going to be so good, man. 6'4", 225. It's a starter. He just turned 22. He's pretty young still.
Florida State 2023 CBB pick 63 overall. So he was a balanced pick after the second round. Yeah, I mean, overall 253 ERA on the year, 23 games started, 99 innings, 135 strikeouts. I mean, 1.13 whip. Yeah, I mean, dominating, right? And you talked about after the trade, that was 29 total innings. So that's not nothing, right? That's enough time to say, hey, it's 5 total games started with 2 bullpen appearances for the Rays in the minor leagues. You might start a little group think here, Doc. I'm gonna have to see.
It's shocking to me. So I'm seeing where I own him. Nice, I own him basically everywhere. It's great.
August 10th birthday, so technically speaking, next year will also be his age 22 season. We really like that. So if he's at Double A at 22 next year, like you were talking about, like that's kind of age to level, like, this kid. So what do you think? Do you think he'll push your top 100, or do you think it's gonna be close?
No, he's in, dude. No, 100%. No, like this is. I'm gonna do it. Okay. I know. I was pushing. I had Thomas White like top 50 before anyone else. I think I'm gonna be. Baumeister's my next dude for sure. My next guy that nobody's really ranking high. So I don't see what I missed. There's nothing. There's no box being unchecked here other than innings because they're managing his innings.
Okay, good. Yeah. Good, yeah. And that was one thing that I really liked as well with Thomas White that I didn't get to mention with you is just that I like that they gave him 100 innings this year, right? Yeah. Where Sykora is being a little bit babied. Thomas White next year should be 120 to 140, right? Like by the time he's 21, he's going to be ready to go out and throw 200 innings. That's a bit of an exaggeration, but okay. Chase Davis, really bad start to the year. Really picked things up. May have like saved his prospect pedigree and maybe even brought it up. What do you think?
Oh, I definitely didn't bring it up because I remember at one point last season before the draft, he was being viewed as a top 5 fantasy guy.
Like top 5 FYPD was the thought?
Yes.
Okay.
I remember seeing it from like guys who knew their stuff. He's an athlete. He's an athlete who doesn't really steal bases, which is weird, but he had freakish bat speed and strength. So really, he smashed a lot of home runs in college, or a good amount at least. Really great batting average and OBP and all this fun stuff. And then he came out in low A as a 22-year-old, and he's out. It doesn't show how bad he was, but I think he was below 200 at one point with like no home runs. It was really, really bad. And so if you look at the months, it'll tell you a better story, but he figured it out at low A, started getting better and better. And you can see the progression more if you just want to look at his baseball reference at high A, coming out, going from 232 at low A as a total. So you can imagine how bad it started. 301 batting average at high A. Oh, okay. That's where he was. That's 388 OBP. Oh, okay. Still like, suspiciously low amount of homers. And he actually ended the season in Double A, which is pretty interesting to me. He's doing okay. It's only been 8 games. So, I mean, I think the season's over now or just about to end. But it's fine. It was like, dude, we were really worried. I mean, if you can't be like struggling at low A as a 22-year-old coming out of a polished guy coming out of college, especially in this Cardinals organization where we're already worried about what they're doing with their hitters, really seemed like an indictment. He dropped off the radar, man. Like I dropped him in one like 20-man dynasty league. Nobody picked him up, and then he started hitting a little bit. I I was able to basically pick him back up for nothing after dropping him. I figured there'd be more bids. Like now, everyone's like, "Nah, we're good." So he's still very underrated. Unlike Jackson Baumeister, I can see reasons why you're concerned here because the power still isn't where you want it to be for a guy who's not running. But I just think there's such like if you have this raw, bat speed, this athleticism, this like he seems to have kind of like this magnetic personality, which is a scout thing, right? It's not really so much a fantasy thing, but dude, they value it. They don't value it for no reason at all. It's like someone that the team likes to have around. It's someone that can maybe make his teammates better. Someone who can maybe, when he gets momentum, he gets really hot. I don't know, right? It's an extra element that maybe you don't have to consider too much, but we'll be looking out for next year. It was a really strange year. Overall, his line is okay. 253 batting average, 350 OBP. It's very mid. It's not like, if you take away Lowe, it got a lot better. 30 games doing over 300 batting average. That's not nothing. So what will the future hold? Well, we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens with the Cardinals management and their development. They got some work to do, man. But Chase Davis is going to be someone interesting to watch, and it will cost you basically nothing to find out if he's going to be something special here.
Yeah, Milwaukee and St. Louis both having players that you want to buy and need rebounds in 2025, but had good pedigrees coming into the draft. I mean, Chase Davis had people comping the possibility of him being a Carlos Gonzalez, who was an all-star, some really good years in Colorado. So Chase Davis still has an opportunity to provide value. Doc, we've got one left. You've got two on the list, but we talked at length about Vientos last week.
Yeah.
So we won't bore the listener. Last one we're going to talk about today is another hit. It's Michael King for San Diego, currently pitching as well tonight. What did you like coming into the year with Michael King, and what are you forecasting moving forward?
I had him in every league pretty much. It's like I just saw nasty stuff going to a pitcher's park with a strong organization. I'm like, he wasn't being valued where he should be. He was just being valued as this kind of, as the CBS guys would say, like a globby guy, maybe even outside. It's just like no one was buying into him as an SP1, as your ace. And frankly, he is that. For fantasy, he's proving he's that. My big concern, if I still had a concern, it was like, yeah, they're going to probably manage his innings at some point. He used to be a reliever. He hadn't really done this many innings. Well, this year he goes out and busts out 161 so far, and obviously that's actually not updated with today's game. Not doing great so far. He's got 2 runs against him, but that's okay if you can limit it there. We'll see how it goes as they get another hit. But Michael King on the year, though, I mean, he's going to hit 200 strikeouts this year. He's almost there right now. People are going to find out even if I bet you there's people, because we're in this weird part of the year where a big chunk of people are either out, their team started losing and they were out of contention months ago, or fantasy football starting up. It's kind of those things where people are going to wake up next year at draft day and be like, he did what? He had a 3.06 ERA with a 200 strike, whatever, had this amazing line. I kind of didn't notice that. And so, yeah, I think that Michael King was someone who I didn't really ramble on about, but I made my case. I said, hey guys, yeah, go make sure you go get him. It's a value here. And I don't think you're going to get him at as much of a value next year. I think he's still not baked in, but I think by next year's draft season in the spring, in the winter, 2025 winter, you're going to see Michael King going at SP1 costs.
Man, this is I think this was best case scenario for what we could have expected from him. Would you agree?
I mean, for the innings pitched, I can't believe it that he hasn't been that hurt either. So the fact that he's been able to stand up is the only thing that's surprising to me. Early on this year too, especially if you're someone who's real casual, which you're probably not listening to our podcast if you're really casual in friggin' almost October. But but he was kind of up and down. He'd have a blow up and then a great game, a blow up, a great game, and he just leveled out. He figured it out, which makes sense. I mean, this was his first full season as a starter, so he figured it out. The team's gelling. It looks like Michael King is here to stay, and it's interesting. Again, the pitcher's age. He's still You know, he started off the year, oh, he's becoming a starting pitcher at 29. Is that risky? But now by the end of the year, when he's proven it to us, now it's like, oh, he's just 29 and he's learning how to. He's an elite pitcher. Does that mean 10 years? Like, you might have a decade with this guy. Maybe not, but like, you're gonna have like he's not old, and you got a fun future with Michael King if he's on your dynasty team. I wouldn't be selling.
Okay, so that was my last question was 167 innings. I don't think that's accounting for the 5 2/3 he's currently at tonight.
He's gonna pitch in the playoffs too.
Gonna pitch in the playoffs, yep. So, maybe he pushes the 200, depending on how good the Padres do. At least 180 here. That doesn't concern you at all next year that, hey, he did stay healthy. He gave you 180 plus innings. Maybe that the 2025 season is when we see an incurred injury. Are you more in the thought process of, hey, he's done it now, he should be good?
It's an interesting question. I wouldn't be shocked if it happened, but why did it not happen this year? I think there have been people talking about, it doesn't always show up right away. But everyone's always trying to figure out the answers to this TJ puzzle.
Yeah.
It could just be, he's just built different. Frankly, he's bigger than I think. Like, I feel like I always picture him as like 6 foot, 6'1". He's 6'3", 210.
Mm-hmm.
He's big enough. Pretty big dude. I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see if I'm able to pick him, because sometimes when I pick the breakout guys and I get a discount on them in 1 year, I have a harder time buying in on the next year.
Yeah.
It's like Nolan Jones was that for me this year. A couple times I did pull trigger. I'm like, screw it, we're doubling down, and I guess I shouldn't have. But sometimes it pays off though. Sometimes they're for real. And Michael King, we'll find out, but he's in a good position to repeat, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think what I really look forward to is the end of season production. Like the last 3, 4, 5 games that they pitch really matter, and that's to be said about the postseason too, as you had brought up. I mean, King's going strong tonight. 5+ innings, allowed 2 runs, 5 strikeouts. It's definitely concerning if at the end of the year, in a season like this where they pile up innings for the first time, it's like, oh, their last 4, 5, 6 starts really sucked, right? Like Garrett Crochet. Like every time he goes out there now, it's like you lose a little bit of that shine and a little bit of that luster, because it's less and less the confidence that you needed to go into 2025. So that's why I wanted to ask you about King and next year. But I think we're going to save our conversation about our teams as well as some of the players that we are looking forward at acquiring, trading, holding on for next week in the end of season wrap, since we are already over the hour threshold. Doc, anything else before we say goodbye today?
I just hope y'all won some championships. I am in the finals of the Dynasty Guru 20-man redraft finals. It's my only championship I'm part of right now. A lot of my teams, a lot of my startups, I just went straight into an immediate rebuild. So I'm doing that. And some other leagues are rotos. It looks like I'm hoping I can win this one, man. It's a really gritty team, and we'll talk about that, and I'll review how it went next week. But so far, so good. Hey, my advice to you, if you have a time machine, buy low and pay the draft day discount on Chris Sale and Paul Skeens, because apparently that's a really good idea. Apparently that's a good idea.
That worked out really well for a lot of people.
And hold on,
finally, Chris Sale, finally,
because he might help me win me the dang league after all.
Yeah, man, hilarious. Chris Sale.
Yeah,
that sucks.
Anyway.
All right, Doc. Well, that's all I've got for him today. Anything else?
I'm your Huckleberry.
We'll catch you guys next week.